Hello, everyone. Welcome to a new episode of DC Cabs Driven podcast. We are very excited today because we have a very special guest. We have with us Brendan Green, the President and CEO of ISA, Industrial Supply Association. Brendan, it's awesome and it's a pleasure to be chatting with you. And welcome to DC Cabs Driven podcast.
Well, thanks for having me, Karthik. Glad to be here.
Brendan, before we get started, I would like to learn a little more about ISA for audience who are not very familiar with what ISA is and what it does and why ISA. Can you just tell us a little bit about the ISA story?
Sure. No, this is one of my favorite topics, as you can imagine. So it's important kind of to remind people that are listening that ISA has been around for a really long time. We were actually founded in some name, shape, or form. We've had different names along the way at the turn of the century in 1902. You know, we were founded that time by a group of really pioneering distributors that saw a need. Think about what was happening in the world at that time, right in the middle of the second industrial revolution. There's advancements in transportation, mass production, communication, distribution. Really, modern distribution was really born right in this age. And so there was a need to create collaboration between distributors, but also to create better relationships with their manufacturer supplier partners in order to navigate these challenging times together. And so ISA has been a constant ever since then. Think about what the world has gone through. You have a Great Depression, or you have the war effort for World War II, or you have inflation in the 70s. You have the rise of e-commerce and the dot-com era. Now you have COVID-19 and the rise of AI. ISA has really always been a platform to navigate these changes as a unified channel. So what makes us really different, and what really, the why ISA is that, we have as equal stakeholders, manufacturers and distributors. There's a lot of interaction that goes on between those partners, and oftentimes from the outside, they can be seen as, on the opposite sides of a negotiating table. But at ISA, it's really about strengthening their collaborative efforts in order to better serve a complex end user, one that's evolving super fast and has different needs. A distributor trying to do that on their own is fighting, I believe, with one arm behind their back. There's a lot of value that manufacturers bring to that equation, and they can do that by either networking through ISA or leveraging our business analytics tools that really take in insights from a peer-driven information. Or we're doing a lot of work in workforce empowerment, building up the companies to make sure that the longevity is really there. So the why for ISA is this is the industry for the MROP channel, for the maintenance, repair, operations, and production channel. We are heavily weighted in safety and in metalworking, but think about everything that really ends up in that factory that doesn't end up on the finished product that heads out the door. Our companies are making it or they're distributing it. So, we're laser focused on the next 120 years of ISA's history in this channel. But it's a good story. I like telling it, as you can tell.
Oh, it's amazing. I didn't know ISA existed since, or it was started like 100 years ago, since 1902. That's amazing. I'm just curious because you read a lot. Have you guys documented the history over 100 years of
Yeah,
how
we
ISA has evolved?
it's actually a very interesting project that doesn't have a whole lot of documentation, especially when you try to focus in on what happens at ISA. And this is just a little anecdote. I found there's a research library, I think it's in Ohio, that has like boxes and boxes and boxes of like proceedings from annual conventions that have existed for 120 years, board meetings. And so I might have to make a little pilgrimage out to Ohio to get access to this, because it's not digitized at this point. But I think it would be a fascinating story to tell. And I think it would reinforce the power of an association to navigate these challenges, and what an association can really do that is aimed at the right mission, which I believe has never changed since our founding.
Yeah, that'll be a fun project. I'm just curious to know your journey with ISA because you were the director of operations for ISA for a year and a half, and then you left them, and then you started working with Nuclear Materials Management, Institute of Nuclear Materials Management. And then you are also an executive director at Indoor Air Quality Association, IAQA. And then you came back to ISA and now you're the CEO. Tell us about your ISA story.
Yeah, so my ISA story, so my whole career has been working with mission-driven organizations, and typically trade associations or individual membership associations, and I love working in these groups, not just because it typically you're on a small staff that allows you to have your hands in a whole lot of different things. So you might do a lot of marketing one day or sales another day or IT or HR. You get to do a little bit of all of this when you work on such a small team. But my ISA journey really, what was compelling for me with ISA is that, all of these organizations I've worked with have a mission and have a purpose and have a focus for the future. But I think ISA is incredibly well positioned. I think it not only does it have a phenomenal group of members and board of directors and history, but it also has the strength of vision and to remain important no matter what is thrown at it. So no matter how this world changes, our products are going to need to be made and sold, and there is always going to be a need for a collaboration. So I think our mission is the right one, and it's the reason why I came back. Is I felt that I could have a long career working with the Industrial Supply Association. I think that it's got longevity written all over it. It's financially well positioned. It's got like I said, a good board that supports a lot of new initiatives, and that's encouraging. And right now, I think we're in a moment where, coming out of COVID-19, everyone was really scratching their head and questioning whether associations would continue to provide value. And I'm happy to say we are growing. We are on an upswing, and there's a lot of momentum building. And that's really stuff that is coming from our new initiatives, not just people coming back to what we've always done, but they're doing that and they're engaging with our stuff involving next gen leaders or educational platforms. I mean, things like this are stuff that we've never really done before. And I think it's striking a chord with what people are needing for the future.
And who funds ISA? Because I've seen your events are really big and it offers a lot of value. So is it mostly the events you run and the membership fee? Is that what funds the ISA organization, or who's involved, and how do you get funding?
Yeah, so very similar to most associations, we don't solicit outside funding. There's no grants or anything like that. We are entirely member and event driven. So the revenue that we get from our membership through membership dues, as well as our events, are what float all the operations of ISA. And we're a lean organization. We have 7 employees. And when you think about what we can accomplish with our 7 employees, plus a nice group of volunteers that assist, it's truly amazing how we're able to accomplish so much. I mean, a lot of that is because of the phenomenal team I have working for me. I mean, they are truly incredible individuals that are experts at what they do. But we managed to do a lot with a modest budget, and it's entirely member driven.
Awesome. And you talked about MROP, maintenance, repair, and operations. Can you tell us a little more about the MROP market, and how big is the MROP market?
It's a good question. I would say, it is. It's hard to define the edges of this market, because there's a lot of products that are sold into different type of end users. There's a lot of products that are sold through different verticals of distribution, and so it's difficult to define that. But we've worked with some economists to try to scope that out, and it's somewhere between 200 and 300 billion dollars as far as our industry that flows through, if we're talking specifically about the U.S. market. So that puts it up there in terms of major market. But think about heavy manufacturing, meaning like aerospace or automotive or even construction to some realm. We are the providers of all of the metalworking. We are the providers of all the safety equipment and all the safety apparel and PPE. We have members who are serving in Jansan, and we even have electrical. I mean, so it really depends on how you're defining our product scope. But I think that the answer there is it's a large industry, and our members are they're growing. It's a positive time to be in this business.
Awesome. And talking about repair, I've seen a lot of distributors offer repair to their customers, and some distributors decide to stay away from it. Hey, I don't want to get into the repair business. Do you have any thoughts there with where distribution is heading? How critical is repair? Let's say I buy a product from a distributor and it doesn't work. Do I have to rely on the distributor to repair it, or Should I go somewhere else? What are your thoughts there?
I mean, I think that what we're seeing is distributors getting more and more close to the customer. I mean, they are shifting from being product, specifically just product focused or logistics focused to being solutions providers. I think that they're driving a lot of value there. I mean, if you look at any distributor's P&L statement, if you ever get a chance to look at one, the margins are razor thin. I mean, they are not massive margins. And so by providing these services in repair or in other areas, training, development, things like that, they're creating a lot more stickiness with their customers. And so, yes, I am seeing that they are getting in on the shop floor to make sure that their customer sees value from them beyond just product or logistics. I think that there's a lot of room to satisfy the customer, especially when you look at the major disruptors and how you can differentiate against them. So if you're looking at, the Amazons or, even Zoro or some of these, I mean, those are not hands-on the shop floor methods of go-to-market. They are a price or a logistics play. And so the value that a distributor can bring in being close to the customer and having a face-to-face interaction, that's a huge differentiator where I see distribution, especially in our channel, holding on to a lot of market share. I mean, if you look at the fractured nature of our channel, if you take that piece of the pie, that 200 billion, only about 25% of it comes from the publicly traded companies, the very large. Everything else is, maybe $100 million or less. So you have a lot of players in the market that are still scratching an itch that is needing to be scratched. And I don't see that going away very soon. I think that the nature of the products that we're serving and the nature of the complexity around our end users' needs requires somebody to be there, somebody to be a solution to a problem that you have, as opposed to just a good buying experience online.
Yeah, offering solutions makes a lot of sense. I'm just curious, right? So let's say when you talk about distribution, even when we work with our customers, I usually see our customers located in places like Ohio or Tennessee and things like that, or states like that. But then I don't really see a lot of distributors in places like, let's say, San Francisco or New York. Is that right? Or what do people in San Francisco and New York do? So what are your thoughts there?
I mean, I think there's distributors everywhere. I think that if we were to do a heat map of where our distributors are located, we probably have less distributors on the West Coast than we do on the East Coast. I think there's a lot of maybe there's more consolidation on the West Coast. I don't know that I have a great answer for the why there, but it just sort of is, less focus on maybe the small natured or the local market distributors. It is a little bit more spread out on the West Coast too. In terms of the proximity to factories and things like that. So yeah, don't have an exact scientific answer to why. I just know that it exists. There's more. If I look at my members, they exist in a little bit more density east of the Mississippi for sure.
Oh, great. And do distributors ask you for advice? I'm sure they do. What's a typical conversation like between you and, let's say, a distributor or somebody who's running a large distribution or a manufacturing company? What is a typical conversation like? Do they call you?
Yeah, no, I talk to member companies all the time, and I think it's I get to play a really what I really love to do is connect people. I'm not by any means a deep expert in a ton of different topics. I think that I like to think of myself as an expert in leadership and a good outside of the box thinker. But my background and history is not in the industrial channel. And so what I do get the opportunity to do is talk to a lot of people, which kind of gives me a unique perspective on issues. So number one question I always get is, well, what are you hearing about, the market, or what are you hearing about next quarter? And I get to aggregate a lot of conversations that way to get a feeling for what's coming. But the rest is somebody calling me and saying, hey, do you know anybody who's looking for, I have an open position, or I'm looking for representation from a rep agency in this market. Can you recommend anybody? Or, I'm trying to get distribution in this market. Do you know anybody that I can talk to? I mean, I get those questions all the time. So I think that's who ISA is in general, is we are a connector of this channel, and people come to ISA in order to be connected into this industry. There are other groups that do this, but they narrow the scope of who can belong. We really believe that if you are making a product in our space, or you are a distributor of a product in our space, or an IMR, you belong in ISA because you belong in this industry. So we don't restrict on ownership structure, publicly traded, independently owned, family business, large, small. We believe that everybody belongs here and everybody plays a role somewhere. So it's just ISA can be a good connector that way.
Yeah, you talked about channel, and I was also on the ISA website and I was reading about Channel 2.0, which essentially says a new standard of expectations, helping all stakeholders, here distributors, manufacturers, and IMRs, create better strategic value for each other while satisfying the end users' evolving needs. So can you talk us through Channel 2.0 and
Yeah, so Channel 2.0 was a strategic framework. It was just as a way of explaining, how we see the channel collaborating together. I think it all starts as it should with the end user. And so what we've created is we call them compasses for each of the stakeholders of the channel, from end user to distributor to manufacturer to IMR. And in each compass, the middle wheel is the driver of change, and then the outer part of the wheel is the capabilities needed to satisfy that. And so what we want to show is that when the end user does something, say they are moving more into a need to have a quicker buying process or a more frictionless buying process, and the capabilities needed there is a better B2B e-commerce website to function that way. That will flow down through the channel in everybody's compass. So all of a sudden now the distributor needs to say, okay, I need to be more robust in my B2B e-commerce. What are the capabilities needed for me? I'm going to need better content-rich data from my manufacturer. I'm also going to need specialties or a specialist on my staff or partners to help me with the functionality of my e-commerce website. That now will focus down into the manufacturer that now needs to provide that, but also, make sure that they are capturing that and maybe providing training or whatever that goes along with it. So what it really is that waterfall effect for every single thing that the end user is needing as they evolve through the channel. And that, again, is aimed at not just giving a roadmap for how you can solve a problem. It's also to understate or to underline the importance of collaboration all the way through the channel in order to solve the end user's problem. That it's not just up to the distributor to make sure the end user is happy. Manufacturers can play a role. The IMRs can play a role. Everybody can enhance the experience for the end user if they're aligned and if they're working together. So it's a way of seeing beyond the four walls of your company and saying, all right, well, what is the perspective of my channel partners? What's the perspective of those that are below me in the chain? How can I put myself in their shoes and better understand how to work with them as opposed to just negotiate against them or point fingers? So I think it's a way of getting strategic alignment as it's stated in kind of its mission.
Yeah, I love the word channel. It really helps connect people and do a lot of things. But I'm just curious, right? Let's say a new industry is getting started and there is no channel out there. Well, we're talking about distribution and you already have the channels established, so it's easy. I wouldn't say it's easy, but then, you have the pieces of the puzzle and you can get that together. But then let's say a completely new industry is getting started. Somebody is coming up with a disruptive innovation and there's no channel. How do you end up creating the channel, or do you have any thoughts there? Or how does that evolve?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure. I mean, our business has been around for a very long time. We're a very mature, industry that doesn't necessarily make sweeping changes or think in a startup mindset. But I would assume that you would apply these same principles. You could look at Channel 2.0, which is vertical agnostic. It could be electrical, it could be pipe, valves, and fitting, it could be HVAC, it could be food. It's still the same principles for the most part. So I think that you would look to these nuts and bolts and say, how can we take some of this concepts and this framework and apply it in? I mean, I would assume that when you're starting out a new channel, it's a little bit of winging it, but this might give you a little bit more structure to say, how can we mature at a maybe faster pace and apply some of these principles so that our distribution networks can meet the needs of those end users that would probably not have too much patience. They would probably say, all right, if a new market's here, I need my products and I need it now. If a channel can't develop, I'm going to go to Amazon or I'm going to go somewhere else and buy it direct. And again, I think that there's a miss there. There's a missed opportunity to provide increased value to that end user and help them be a solutions provider so that they can focus on their customers, not on their supply chain.
Yeah, they say great companies are built on great ecosystems and great channels. And I was wondering about this. Like, for instance, you look at companies like Apple or on the software industry, companies like Apple or Oracle or Salesforce, they have built great channels and they have great channel partners and they have a great ecosystem around it. And I'm just thinking out loud, hey, what came before that, right? So maybe HP, so they copied from HP. And what came before HP? Maybe HP copied from the distribution channel or how the distributors work, So it's been going on for ages, yeah. So it's really interesting thinking about this.
Yeah, I mean, I think that what it comes down to is partnership. Is seeing your suppliers and seeing those that play a role as partners as opposed to just suppliers. It's there are businesses that have to run on both sides, and if both can align and figure out how to make sure that 1+1 = 3, then you're better serving the end user, and you have a lot more likelihood of serving that end user for a longer time. So I think it's really about that mindset of not just squeezing every dollar you can out of your supply chain. It's partnership.
Absolutely, and it's about what you give and not what you get. Really well said. So I'm just talking about digital transformation. I'm just curious to know your views on how digital transformation has impacted the industrial distribution community or the industrial distribution companies. This is my thought process, and I would love to get your views on it. You can tell me if I'm right or wrong. So I kind of feel the distributors are a little slow when it comes to adopting to digital transformation, let's say an e-commerce or integration. Hey, you've got to get all your systems integrated so you can get better efficiency for your customers. Is that a right observation? Are they a little slow to adapt? And what are you seeing, and what is ISA doing in this regard?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't disagree with that we're a little slow. I mean, there are some that are pushing faster than others, but on the whole, I think that it is we're behind other industries in complexity and leveraging the power of digital. That said, I mean, I think you can't open up a trade publication or anything without seeing the first 10 articles being about digital transformation. It's top of mind for people. I think people are exploring it more and more every day. I think the challenge is bandwidth for a lot of companies. I think a lot of companies are, operating on, again, razor thin margins and looking at the investment needed both in time and money in order to explore this. And they're seeing, I could stop what I'm doing and explore how to spin up my e-commerce website, or I can meet with my 4 customers today. And I think that that's a hard thing to weigh, and so that's probably not helping with the pace of acceleration around what our industry needs to do. But it's top of mind. I mean, they are all more and more, everybody is paying attention to and implementing. I mean, I look at this from who is playing at ISA, from both a member point of view, but also what we call service provider point of view. Companies that are tech companies are coming to our events more and more to talk about their services. Experts in this field are coming more and more and finding a lot more engagement from our members because of their appetite is probably a little bit more every year. Everybody is now understanding that some of these solutions have gone down in terms of complexity and implementation time, and that makes them more palatable. I think before it was like when you thought about new technology, you considered like your ERP, and your ERP implementation can be years, and companies to take that on, it's a necessity, but it's also extraordinarily painful, and as much as I love the ERP companies, there's not a whole lot they can do to make that less painful. It's disruptive. But some of these plug and play solutions, some of these things like leveraging automation or AI, we're talking months or even weeks of spin up time to get them up and running, and that's attractive. And so I think that as the ability for our distributors and manufacturers and just the companies in ISA to be able to recognize the value and the ability for their companies to take advantage of these things, the pace will quicken, but it will quicken for everybody too. So it's definitely a catch-up game, Karthik. I think that we're playing catch up to our customer, which is not a great position to be in. But just know that more and more companies are jumping in as much as they possibly can, because it's table stakes now for what you need to do to satisfy a modern end user.
Oh, that's a great observation, Brendan. I can relate to that, and I totally agree with that as well, because the time of implementation is drastically reduced right now, and people are expecting faster results. And the good news is the technology companies are also adapting to that. Hey, if you're going to say it's going to take 12 months to implement or a year and a half to implement, people are not ready for it. Hey, we need faster results, and automation really helps here. Yeah, it's a great observation. I agree with that. And just moving on, we see some manufacturers getting to distribution and distributors getting into manufacturing. So there's a blend right there. So what are some of the biggest challenges and opportunities you're seeing in the industrial distribution market today?
Well, I mean, that's definitely a challenge right now. That puts I don't want, maybe strain isn't the right word, but it puts some complexity in the relationship between manufacturers and distributors. And not every distributor is capable of doing that, but some are. And I think that, oftentimes those private label products that come through are not, of the same quality, or they're not of the same, they're not from, they're brought in from overseas, and so it just challenges the relationship, and I think ultimately it challenges the industry. It challenges our ability to provide significant value to the end user, or to find, for the end user to say, this is my trusted source for high quality and well delivered products. Otherwise we run the risk of, either disintermediation or completely going around our channel and going from an e-tailer. So, that's a challenge that I think needs to be figured out. I can't stand here and tell a distributor that I think that what they're doing is bad in all cases, because every case is a little bit different. But I think that, it is something to play to your strengths. And I think we all need to be looking at that. Even ISA needs to say, what do we do? And what can we do and be the best at? Should I try and, add remittances and a rebate program into what we do? No, that's not what we do. That's never what we've done. So we're going to stay in our lane. And sometimes that's the best way to win, is to stay in your lane and to do what you do best. There's a reason why these other networks exist. There's a reason why distributors are really good at what they do. And maybe we need to understand the value, the real value that distributors provide beyond just relationship with the customer or break bulk. It's more than that. And manufacturers on the other side need to, reiterate why their products are the superior product. They need to be, doing a really good job with providing marketing and training and providing the right assets and the right ways for their products to be sold to distributors. So again, it all gets back to partnership. It all gets back to saying, our best method is by collaborating closely with our suppliers and making sure that if we work in the right way, 1 + 1 can equal 3.
Yeah, collaboration is the name of the game. So just shifting gears a little bit, Brendan. So your father was a high school principal, and I think you also went to the same high school where your dad taught. So how was that, right? Experience A, what are the pros and cons of going to the same high school where your dad teaches? And I'm also curious to know about your early years of growing up, and how is that impacting your role as a CEO today?
Sure. Wow. Okay. We're going to go deep here. So, my dad was my principal, and sorry, Dad, if you're listening, he was my principal for high school. I went to a Catholic high school in Lawrenceville, New Jersey, where I live now. And he was really well liked by the students. And I would say that it was, so that wasn't an issue. He wasn't, people weren't, coming to me saying that, your dad's a disciplinarian or anything like that. He was really well liked. So that was easy. But, let's just say I made him pay for it a little bit. I was a good student, but not always the most well-behaved. And so I put him in some tight spots. But as far as how that's kind of formed the way I look at things, I mean, both of my parents were educators. They were And one of my sisters is now, in a similar role that my dad had. And so I think that being an educator is a really good lesson in multitasking. It's a really good lesson in seeing the bigger picture. And more important than anything, I think it's found its way to me in the fact that it's purely mission driven. Educating the youth of America, or of their, student body. What a noble calling, what a noble thing to do. And there's a real passion for the work that they did in their jobs, both my parents and my sister. And I think that, learning from that is saying what you can do can serve a higher calling than just making money. Anyone who knows an educator knows that they're not in it for the money. It's something that I think has really left an impression on me, that if you believe in the work that you do, and you believe that it's serving something that is beyond just a paycheck, it can be really formative, and really rewarding. And so I got to watch that firsthand. And we were comfortable in our lives with that, but I never felt that there was a trade-off. I got a dad who loved his job and a mom who loved their job, and seeing that left me saying, I want that. And so now I'm happy to say I have it, and I get to carry the lessons I learned about leadership and about multitasking and about, just in being genuinely well respected by those you serve as a way that I hope to live up to.
Oh, it's great to learn from parents, and kids always learn from their parents, the dad and mom. So that's awesome, Brendan. The theme of this podcast is driven. So my question to you is, how are you driven? And also, when I was watching some of your interviews, one thing I observed is you are a great listener. So can you share your leadership philosophy and how it influences your approach to employees and members?
I think that leadership for me is a learning journey for sure. I probably will always consider myself a new leader, no matter how long I've been in a leadership role. I think it's the mindset of saying, I don't have all the answers. I don't have everything figured out. And so tap into those that are experts in their area, or anybody. Everybody can provide a perspective that can lead to a good idea. And so, when I look at what drives me in terms of leadership, it's that ability to be a sponge and to kind of open up my eyes and ears to the world around me and look for that diamond in the rough in terms of an idea that's going to be transformative for ISA. So as much as it might in this modern day, when people talk about work-life balance and the lines being very blurred between those two, I don't think I ever stopped thinking about ISA, but it's not draining. It's more of like, what can I apply from, hanging out with my little kids. I've got a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old and another baby born in 7 days from now. And what can I learn from that I can apply to, the way that I interact with my team or my members? I mean, there's something to be gleaned from every experience that can help you do your job more. And so, I also think, no matter what, hire great people. I mean, you've got to have a team that is working with you on these initiatives so that you can, free up your mind to think about other things, so that you can rely on them to do the work that needs to be done and to grow in their own way, so that you don't have to do everything. I think that was a big lesson for me immediately, was I can't do everything. And so you have to start letting go and let people, surprise you with how well they do things, and that they can do things even better than you can, which I think is probably the most rewarding feeling, is when you see somebody that works for you do something way better than you ever could.
So 3 kids is a blessing, and congratulations, Brendan, on that. And also delegating, right? So I've seen this quite a bit as well. So I have the same feeling, right? So where, hey, you know what? Sometimes people can do it better than you, and then just let them do it. But let's say when you're trying to do the same thing, it gets messed up. So it's better to just hire great people and leave them alone. Yeah, really well said. I can totally relate to that. So Brendan, the world is changing. So what advice would you give to the executive leadership at the industrial distribution companies or to the member companies of ISA?
I think number one advice is just recognize that you don't have all the answers, and that there's opportunities to learn everywhere. There's opportunities to learn from each other, from experts, from people that are way outside of our field, but be open to what opportunity is out there. Be vulnerable, share a little bit more than maybe you're comfortable with, because I think that if you can do that, then others will too. And so leverage your peer network, leverage your trade association to be able to help you there. But I think it is recognizing our vulnerabilities and recognizing our opportunities and being open to both. I think if you can do that, you're much more likely to find the solution that's going to ensure your longevity and your relevance in this channel.
No, great advice, Brendan. I'm just curious to know some of your failures, right? Maybe at ISA or even outside of ISA. Can you talk about some of your failures and what you learned from them?
Sure. I'll say this. I think I learned very early on that I am a person who needs motivation, and I need to believe in what I'm doing in order to succeed. And so very early on in my college career, I kind of was rudderless. I went to the University of Vermont. And if you did not want to do work, there was plenty of distraction available. And so I quickly, realized I didn't have a purpose for why I was there. I was not self-motivated in a way to just say I wanted to get good grades. And that's really kind of transferred into me saying, I don't just want to make more money. I need a purpose for why I'm doing this. And so, college for me was not something that came naturally. I needed to work on. So that's probably first big failure for me is to say I needed to fall on my face and pick myself up myself. My parents weren't going to teach me how to do it. My friends weren't going to show me this is why you need to do it. I needed to motivate myself. And I did. Figured out why I wanted to do it, switched my major over to business and never looked back. So that's probably first big life lesson for me in terms of failure. And then, I think more recently is, stepping into this leadership role at ISA, not having a real grasp on the power of letting go. I think that I felt a tremendous amount of pressure and still feel pressure. But I felt a tremendous amount of pressure to have everything be perfect because I felt under a microscope. And so I was hesitant to let things go. And I think that ultimately led to me being a little bit more unhappy. It ended up, hurting the performance. I think that, maybe that might not have been seen, but, I felt it for sure. And I think that my team was a little unsure of what was going on. And so, that taught me that I needed to let go. I needed to trust the people that I had working for me and trust my own vision, and just move forward. And so again, that leader's journey for me has been important to understand that it's not just about having all the right answers. It's about sometimes taking a step back and trusting that others will be able to handle things. And again, back to what I said before, maybe do it better than you could have. So those are just two examples, I guess.
And you talked about distraction. I'm just curious. I'm sure all of us get distracted, and then you get distracted. And then how do you get back on track? Is there anything you do?
So for me, it was, and now I'm really oversharing here. For me, it's kind of like a mantra of being going towards something that either is moving away from something negative or moving towards something positive. And so for the college example, and I'll just share this, I had taken a year off after that, after my first year, and tried to assess things. And I went and started working at restaurants, and that was a good experience. I liked working in restaurants, and I think it's, again, been part of my journey. And so it's led me there. But what I did is I kind of looked around at those that were maybe a little bit older than me still doing that. And I kind of said, that's not what I want for myself. Might be great for them. But, so my mantra was, you don't want to be working at a restaurant when you're 30, And so every day when I got up at 8 to go to class, I told myself that. I reminded myself when somebody would say, hey, do you want to go out tonight? I would say, I don't want to be working in a restaurant when I'm 30. So I think that it's like a mantra thing. Now, really, it's more about maintaining the happiness I have. You want to be a happy person. And right now, the balance I have between life and work and family and everything like that is a really great fit. And so it's like, how do I continue to do what I'm doing right now? How do I continue to work with great people, to, be able to spend a lot of time with my family? I get to work from home, and so I get to see them. How do I keep this great feeling going. So it's kind of a mantra thing. When it gets hard and when it's straining, I remind myself, you've got a really good thing going, keep it going. So that's kind of my motivation.
Thanks, Brendan. You read a lot, and I would like to end with this question. What book are you reading right now?
Yeah, so I knew this one was coming. So it's sometimes when you catch somebody that isn't reading a book, they scramble and grab something off their desk. But two things actually. One, I have an executive coach who, if anybody is in a similar role to me or in any role, I highly recommend a executive coach. It's lonely sometimes to be at the top of your organization, and even your board of directors, they're technically your boss, or your employees, they work for you. And so you don't really have a good, vulnerable place to go. Executive coaches do that. But his name is Dirk Schlimm. He wrote a book. It's called Influencing Powerful People. And I think it's fascinating. He's got a really, really good take on that and some good practical lessons that he's learned. And he comes from the Jim Collins vein, the Good to Great and Built to Last. So he's a student of that and applies a lot of the same principles. But I think it's really helped me with my conversations. I talk to CEOs of major billion-dollar companies, and those can be intimidating conversations. And the lessons that you learn there are, really, I think they're palatable for almost anybody. So Influencing Powerful People. And then the second one is, and the title is, I think, a little misleading. It's called Great CEOs Are Lazy. And again, I don't consider myself a lazy person, but what it's reinforcing for me is some of the things we're talking about here of letting go. It is your ability to, they have this one line in it that always sticks in my head. If somebody that works for you can do what you do 70% as good as you can do it, you let them do it. And that just, sticks in my head so well, because I'm like, all right, I don't need to seek perfection. By them doing that 70% as good as I can, I'm now 100% freed up from that time to do something else that needs to be done. And so it teaches me a lot about how to sweep in and out of work that my people that work for me do without disrupting them, to know how to course correct, but then to get out of it. And I think that that's the key. If you want to work on a small team or even a larger team, you don't want to micromanage, but you also want to make sure that everything is moving in the right direction. So I recommend both of those books. They're a good read and pretty quick reads.
Oh, great recommendations, Brendan. Thank you so much for that. And I know I said last question, but I'm going to ask you one more, because this is something a lot of people are curious about, or maybe I also had this question. You talked about executive coach. So how did you end up finding your executive coach? Because it's a question a lot of people have, right? Say, I've actually read people, I've read in books saying that, hey, you know what, you got to work with an executive coach. But how do you go about finding an executive coach, and how did you find your executive coach?
Yeah. So, when it was actually recommended, my coach was recommended, but my board of directors, when I took this role, suggested that I seek an executive coach, not because they all use executive coaches, not because they felt that was deficient in an area, but they said this has been a big help for me, from their perspective. And so, they gave me free rein to go seek, a couple different kinds. And what I quickly found out is it's a huge field that has a lot of different ways to do it. And so, I got a lot of recommendations. I did a lot of research, and ultimately came to 3 kind of finalists that all did very different things. I had one that his focus was much more about Brendan's self, and a little bit more of like a life coach. And there's a lot of value in something like that, talking about my own personal goals and the way I want to spend my mind share, and all kinds of things like that. Even like health was incorporated into that. The second coach that I was looking at was much more of a communications coach, which again can touch everything. But the way that we as leaders communicate to both our stakeholders or to our teams, whatever, that needs to be refined. And then the last coach, the one I ended up really selecting, was much more of a business coach. This is a former business leader who has written books and a little bit more of an academic approach. But I get to talk to him about specific business problems or even long-term things that need to be done. And so I ended up selecting him that way. And all 3 of these came from recommendations from peer networks. So I reached out to my board, asked if anybody would refer me. I asked other coaches that I kind of interviewed, if there anybody else that I should talk to. And I found that they were all very receptive to that question. They have a pretty tight network that says, I might not be the right one for you, but I think you'd fit really well with this. And so it's really what it comes down to more than anything is you got to talk to the person and you got to like talking to them. So I look forward to my monthly call or bi-monthly call with Dirk, because I like talking to him. It's not like a therapist. It is much more of here's what's going on in my world. Here are 3 goals that I have for this upcoming year. Let's knock all 3 of them out and let's progress towards them. But so you can look at it in a big way, or you can look at it in a short-term issue resolution type of thing too. But I don't know, incredibly rewarding experience. Highly recommend for anyone looking.
Yeah, it's a great way to end this conversation, Brendan. I really enjoyed this chat. And this is the book I'm reading right now. It's called The Nudge, Richard H. Taylor and Cass R. Sunstein. It's a great book, right? It talks about nudging. How do you nudge people to do things? And it can be used both in a positive way. But Brendan, I really enjoyed this conversation. There was a lot of learning for me. So thanks so much for this enriching conversation. Not just distributors, but anybody watching this would learn a lot. And thanks for your great tips and great advice. And thanks for your leadership lessons. Thanks so much for joining the DC Cabs Driven podcast. And if you have not subscribed to our podcast yet, please click the bell icon and click subscribe. But thanks, Brendan.
Thank you for having me, Karthik, and everyone out there, have a great day.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of the Driven Podcast. Check out our other episodes for more and subscribe to be the first to access every new episode.